You're listening to episode 144 of the Small and Supercharged podcast with Ria Freeman. On today's Small and Supercharged podcast, we're joined by the lovely Kate Hills, who you may know better as the lady behind Make It British. I can't wait to speak to Kate, because I know lots of members in the various Small and Supercharged groups are members of Make It British. So I'm really thrilled to have you here today, Kate. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me on, Ria. I'm a big fan of your podcast.
Oh, well, that's made my day. You're a favourite already. So can you tell us a bit about you and the kind of journey you took to get to founding Make It British?
Okay, so my background is originally in design and retail buying. So, oh God, how far back do you want to go? I'm quite old. So in a quick summary, I studied fashion. I had my own brand when I left college. It was a recycled clothing brand. So back in the early 90s, one of the first green and ethical clothing brands. We had our own little mini factory in East London making it all. So I did that for a few years, didn't have any business skills. The whole thing crumbled because I was a creative designer, but they didn't teach me business at college. And then I sold my soul to the high street. Actually, no, I didn't. I've missed a bit. I had my own business, and then I went to live in Italy, working in Italy, designing accessories. I also worked as a designer. That's when I sold myself to the high street. I went to work as a designer for Tammy Girl, if you remember them. You're probably too young.
No, I do.
Yes. I do. and then I went to work for Burberry, which was a weird jump. So I was an accessory designer for Burberry back when they still had a factory they had several factories in the UK, and they had one in the East End of London, and the design office was based above the factory there. Then I went to work for Marks and Spencer's for many years. I was there for a decade. And I was there at that time when Marks and Spencer's started moving all of their production offshore. So I'd gone from having my own factory, working in Italy, where I went into lots of factories that were local, working at Burberry, where the designers worked in the factory, in the same building as the factory. And then, of course, working for Marks and Spencer's and having to tell poor suppliers that we were no longer going to buy products from them anymore because we could get it cheaper in China. Gosh. And that never sat comfortably with me at all. So that was all quite tragic. And then I got headhunted to go and work as a buying manager for Debenhams, and I was there a couple of years, and they sourced nothing locally, nothing from the UK, most things from the Far East, a couple of suppliers who weren't. And I just didn't like the culture there and the way they treated their suppliers. And I just one day I just went in and handed in my notice to my boss without actually thinking about what I was going to do next. I just knew that I didn't want to work in that industry and in that sort of culture anymore, where the buyers were constantly sort of having to chase all the suppliers for the cheapest possible product. And I wanted to start supporting the companies that still made here in the UK. So this was in 2011. So 10 years ago. And at the time after I handed in my job, I knew I wanted to do something supporting companies that still made in the UK. And I had an idea to build like an Amazon style marketplace selling British made goods, which naively at the time I thought was going to be easy. But of course, back in 2011, there was no marketplaces. We had Amazon, and I think not on the high street, had been going for a couple of years. So I thought I was going to build this great big marketplace. And yeah, to cut a long story short, I got pregnant with my second child. So I parked the idea for a little bit. I went off and at the same time decided to do a master's degree in internet retailing and digital marketing, thinking, well, this will help me when I'm the Jeff Bezos of British brands with my new marketplace. And it made me realize I didn't have the huge amount of capital that was needed to build a platform like that. But what I did do was start the Make It British blog to start raising awareness for these brands and really just start talking about what I loved, which was UK manufacturers. So that's how it all happened.
I love that. So why do you love UK manufacture so much? What is the kind of special stuff that makes you really love it and really passionate about it?
Well, there's several reasons, really. I suppose because as a designer, originally having my own brand, I knew about the benefits of being very close to where your supply base was. And I love being in factories anyway. I mean, even when I was traveling out to the Far East all the time, I just loved the whole the factory environment, the manufacturing environment, people making things. And so I really wanted to support these companies because I was aware that we'd lost most of the skills. And if someone didn't support those factories and manufacturers and people making things that were still here in the UK, those skills would potentially be gone forever. What I was surprised about is how many manufacturers and makers I started to find once I really looked into it. But what wasn't happening at the time was people really shouting about the fact that we still had things made in the UK. In fact, when I told my friends that I'm gonna launch this website selling products made in the UK and talking about brands that made here, they were like, no one makes anything here anymore. They just thought I was totally bonkers. But this was before we had the Olympics in 2012 and the Queen's Jubilee. And at that point, I think that was the first kind of turning point when people started thinking, oh, okay, maybe we should celebrate what we have that we actually manufacture here in the UK. You know, particularly when it comes to textiles and fashion, the Industrial Revolution started in Britain, and yet we've become a country that was full of, service providers and people that work in shops. And, I really wanted to help keep the manufacturing here.
And there are some incredible skills. I mean, obviously now, sort of fast forward from that point, we're seeing some really beautiful products come out of the UK. And I think things over the last few years, particularly the last year, have changed, which I know we're going to talk about in a bit. But one of the common misconceptions around UK products is that they're always more expensive. Always more expensive. And I've seen quite a lot on your Instagram, particularly about that. Actually, that's not quite the case, because when you manufacture abroad, there are other bits that have to come out of it. So have you found that's a misconception that your clients and your members deal with as well? And how are you addressing that?
Yeah, I mean, you can look at that two ways. So firstly, from the consumer's perspective, yes, it is often more expensive to buy not an equivalent, but the same product. So take, for instance, a coat, which you've probably seen the diagram, the infographic we've done on our Instagram. If you buy a cheap coat that's been made with poor quality material and not stitched very well, and you buy it for a very low price, and you compare it to a coat that's been made beautifully out of thick, Harry's tweed or something like that, really well made, and you treasure and keep that coat because you did pay £500 for it rather than £50 for the coat that you've bought on the high street, by the time you compare the cost per wear, the more expensive coat is actually works out cheaper to wear every time you wear it, and you treasure it more. And of course, it's better for the environment not to be buying 10 coats and instead just buy one really good quality one that lasts. So in that respect, it is worth investing in British made products because they will last. And then from the designer's perspective, the cost price you'll get from a factory in the UK will be more expensive than you'll get from one overseas, because labour in the UK is more expensive. But you have to look at all the other hidden costs of those products that you may get made in a factory in China. Some of them might turn up and they're not made as you want them, so you can't sell them. Or you might have bought something that, because of the lead times with China, bought it in a certain colour or a certain style, and when you've bought 1,000 of them and then you get them back to the UK and you can't sell them because they're either out of date or no one likes that style or colour anymore, then the cost of actually writing off that stock is much higher than if you'd bought something that you'd made locally where you sold all of it. So it's simple maths.
No, that's a good point as well, because I know when people order from abroad, usually you do have to have quite big quantities, don't you? Yeah. Because by the time just because of the way it works, you do have to have much greater quantities, which for a small business as well can be quite prohibitive, even if the products are beautiful and really well made and it's a great factory wherever it is in the world. Still having to order that big amount of product is really overwhelming. Whereas often with a British manufacturer, from what I've found with the people that I work with, you can get much smaller quantities to test things, and you can evolve and change faster as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. Testing, exactly. You can buy a much smaller quantity. You can check that the customer actually wants it, especially if you're a new brand starting out. You don't want to be investing in tons of stock. It can really ramp up. If you've got 10 pieces in your collection and you've had to buy 500 of each, I mean, that's 5,000 pieces. That's a lot of stock. You've got to store all that. You've got to sell it. And if you're only selling on your own website or through social media, you're not going to sell the volume than you would do if you were wholesaling. So the traditional wholesale models, selling to loads of stores, you did need to probably buy hundreds, but when you're just selling directly from your own website, you can test it. I mean, I know designers that will literally just buy one piece, put it out on social media, see what the audience reaction to it is, just show the sample, get pre-orders for it, and
Yes.
then actually get it made and work with a manufacturer to get it made.
I love a pre-order. I think that's such a good model that I've seen more and more of, because it stops people having to invest their money in stuff that perhaps won't sell. And it means
zero waste.
Yeah, zero waste. And they've also got the money there, which means they can pay everyone quicker, get it all done faster. And yeah, I think it's a really good model, and it gives you something to kind of look forward to as well. Like, you're excited when it's going to arrive, and especially people use social media well as well. You can kind of track the journey of the products and when they're going to get to you, and build that excitement as well. I think another thing that's quite interesting is that, and this isn't saying that only UK people do this and that other factories don't, but the real drive towards being more sustainable, being more eco-friendly, making sure that people are receiving good treatment through things like the Fair Wear Foundation, making sure people are being treated properly and paid properly. And I think it's great to see that going all over the world, because I do feel it's such an important thing. But that must be something as well, which is really good when it comes to being British, because generally those things will be taken care of more. Or how are you seeing that?
Yeah, I mean, generally, there's some great factories all over the world, so don't get me wrong. And there's some of a very high standard over in China, and they've got all the correct, they're doing everything right. The difference is with manufacturing locally is that you can pop in and see your manufacturer anytime you want. So pretty soon, if you're going to a factory, you will know, you get that sixth spidey sense that something is not right. So a manufacturer in the UK is much less likely to be doing anything dodgy if they know their customers are going to be coming in and visiting them. The thing with working with a Far Eastern factory, it's out of sight, out of mind, which is why most of them have these fancy audits. And, having come from a background where I've been a buyer, they get all these audits done and tick, right, great. You knew as soon as you're out of that factory, there was probably other stuff going on behind your back that you didn't really know about, because how can you properly track it? Whereas if you've got a factory in the UK or any manufacturer, you can much keep an eye on them much better.
So thinking about the last kind of year or few years, how have you seen a change in maybe attitudes towards things made in the UK, or have you not noticed anything there?
Yeah, a huge big interest, particularly in getting stuff made here. So I suppose there's been kind of peaks where, like I talked about, the Olympics and the Queen's Jubilee in 2012, there was definitely more of an interest in buying products that were made in the UK then, as there have been since we've left the EU. More people are saying, actually, I do want to buy products that are made locally now because I want to support local businesses. I don't want to buy stuff that's made in China. But from brands' perspective, much more interested in making locally now, for the reasons we've just mentioned about having a manufacturer locally making smaller quantities, but also now that we have left the EU, actually trying to get products in from overseas if things are being held at customs. There's duty to be paid coming into the UK. It's just much easier to get something made locally. But the issue with that is also that there's only a certain capacity that we have in the UK. We do have the skills here, and I am hearing of new factories and new little workshops and studios opening up all the time, but not quite at the speed to keep up with the demand. So
but that's an exciting position to be in. I know it's obviously there's a lag in it, which is sad for the people that really want to have their things made here now, but a few years ago that wouldn't have been the position. We hear of so many places closing because they just didn't have the business. So the fact that we've now got the kind of demand is outstripping the supply is quite an exciting place to be.
Yeah, and I also think that it now given more people confidence to go and work within a manufacturing or a making environment, whereas before they might have thought to go and work in a shop. So there will be, the more that we talk about how the industry is growing, the more people will see it as a good career to go into. But the other thing that's happening, which I think is really exciting, is that brands are actually starting to set up their own little micro factories. Now, I know we both know Samantha from Wearing Brook, who has her own little knitting micro factory. So she's got one big industrial knitting machine, and she makes all of her own products for her customers, bespoke and made to order. And I'm seeing that happening quite a lot. I'm hearing of lots of little micro factories popping up. So if you do know how to make a product, then that is quite often a good way to go, because you're also cutting out the middleman. You've got total control over your production, and you can do the made to order. And made to order, people, it commands a higher price because people will pay for something that's really special.
Yes, and as you say, you can have it so it's personalized, or you can have it so it's your exact measurements. And because, especially if you have a kind of pre-order model, or you are making the products on demand anyway, although having something bespoke, as you say, it does command a higher price, it's not like they've got a load of stock already there that they really do need to sell. They're making it for you anyway, because that's their business model.
Yeah, exactly. Zero waste. And people will wait as well. I mean, Wearing Brook in, I don't, you've got some of her products, did you say?
Yes.
How long did you wait? It's probably about a week's production time, maybe longer.
That, I think it was here within a week.
Yeah, which is amazing. It's worth waiting for. And you know that someone has handmade it for you.
Absolutely. And it's really cool to have your, I've got the snood and the headband. It's really cool to have your like initials on it in the colors that you love. And yeah, I mean, less than a week, which most places you order from, even if they've got the stock there that they've bought in bulk, you don't really expect it much faster at all, if at all at the moment. So one thing I see a lot of is people saying they're a British brand and people saying made in the UK. Now, there's clearly a difference, because I know of many British brands who make abroad, and this podcast is not about, that's not a good thing to do at all, because we've as we've said, but there's a difference, but it's a difference that isn't always seen. Can you tell us what that difference is?
It's what I call fake it British. It's usually accompanied by a Union Jack flag, which doesn't necessarily mean something's been made in the UK, or it's got a tagline like thoroughly British, or we all know who we're talking about. Yeah, it winds me up something chronic, and it's misleading to the consumer. There's no, if you're selling a product in the UK, you don't have to, other people in the UK, you don't have to label where it's made. Most people do. You don't have to label where it's made. But I do encourage people to always look and try and find out and ask the questions. I got caught out myself recently, and I won't name the brand, but I was about to buy a pair of walking boots that I honestly thought were going to be made in the UK. I'd placed my order. It's only when I double checked with them, because there's pictures of their factory all over their website. And when I double checked with them, they weren't made in the UK, they were made in Europe, which I probably wouldn't have minded if I couldn't get any other walking boots that were made in the UK. It was the fact that they misled me into thinking, and that's me with all my experience from the last 10 years. I honestly thought that they still made these boots in their factory that they were showing on their website. And they said, no, we only make the special order ones here in the special fit. Everything else is made overseas. Oh, but it's a partner factory. But that's not the point, because you're misleading people. And some people do specifically want to buy from that factory that you're showing on your website, because they think they're supporting the workers the craftsmen that you're talking about on your website that are working in this factory.
I think that's the thing. I don't think people mind as such if they're not misled. I think when you feel you're supporting, if you really are passionate about buying products made in the UK, and you feel you've put the time in and you found it, and then it comes and it's got a made in a different country label, you do sort of feel like, why did they think that was necessary? So if we see labels like British brand or thoroughly British, that is perhaps not made in the UK. But if you say made in the UK, you have to be made in the UK.
Technically you do, yes, but it's all got a little bit muddy since we left the EU, because there's something called rules of origin, and the rules of origin have changed now that we've left the EU. So it's totally dependent on what the product is and what sort of transformation the product needs to have gone through in order for it to have that transformation mean it can be classified as made in the UK, made in England, or wherever. And Even I'm confused about it at the moment. I think the DTI are confused about it. Most of our Make It British members are confused about it. The old ruling used to be that if it underwent a substantial change, so one substantial change. So for instance, if you made a pair of trousers where you'd imported the fabric from Italy, but stitched them in the UK, they would be made in the UK. So we're still trying to work on total clarification of how that's going to work, because it is really confusing. If in doubt, it's just always best to get in contact with the brand and actually ask them, where's this product from? And if it is as important to you that the raw materials are also from the UK, then just ask them if they meet that criteria. It's more difficult when you get into things like leather goods, for instance. So saddlery, maybe. So there's a lot of great saddlers in the UK, but some of the leather, although bought from a UK company, may have been imported from Italy, for instance, because we don't necessarily have the sort of tanneries. We have some tanneries here. I think we've got about 11, but the leather from that particular saddle may have come from overseas. So if in doubt, always ask the brand if you really want to know where something's made. And actually, businesses are getting much better at telling you and showing you where their products are made, which is why I got caught out with the boot factory one, because it honestly looked like they were making them in a factory in Yorkshire.
No, I think it's just as being misled, isn't it? So obviously, lots of fabrics don't originate in the UK. Cotton, we don't grow cotton in the UK.
Exactly.
But as you say, if it's a substantial change, so it's not like they've bought a completely fully made T-shirt and they've printed a logo on it. Obviously, I don't know if that's that. I would assume.
Well, funny you should mention that, because I was contacted by someone the other day who said that they were importing T-shirts from Bangladesh, but they were putting the brand's label in the back and they were printing the front. According to the old ruling, they couldn't have labelled them as made in the UK. But because they considered the label and the printing two substantial changes, they thought they could now label them as made in the UK. And they were getting in touch with me to query it. I said, well, no, because the T-shirt's made in Bangladesh. But this is how confused people are by the new rulings.
Yeah, I can understand that. I mean, I wouldn't have thought that was a substantial change, because, as you say, if it comes as a roll of fabric and then it leaves as a top or a pair of trousers, it's not the same thing. But it's really worth knowing, though. And as you say, just reaching out to companies that you're keen to buy from, if it's really important to you, is a key thing. And just saying, can you tell me, not the names of your suppliers, but the kind of the journey that each your pieces go on, where is it sourced, and then where is it put together, and reaching out. They should be happy, I assume, to disclose that anyway. Now, how do you see the sort of future of British manufacture? Do you see it continuing to grow, or how do you see it moving forward?
Yeah, I definitely think it's growing. I mean, since I founded Make It British 10 years ago, it's been growing all the way, despite the fact that, anything that's happened with the rest of the economy, manufacturing locally has continued to grow. It depends on the different types of industry. But I think since we've left the EU, we will start to see price increases from products bought from overseas, which will make the difference between buying something made locally and something that's imported a smaller gap. And I think more people as well want to, particularly since we've had the whole pandemic, want to support local businesses. Yeah. So I think it will continue to grow, definitely.
And thinking of the sort of highs and lows along your journey, because I imagine there have been quite a few. I think every business owner has these kind of amazing highs and you just feel like you're on top of the world, and then this sort of crushing low. Can you share any of those with us?
The low, I tell you what the low was. So I run a trade show. I started it in 2014 that runs alongside Make It British, because I was getting so many companies contacting me looking for manufacturers and suppliers that were in the UK. So I set up a trade show in 2014. I suppose there's all the highs and lows are all attached to that flipping trade show. Because firstly, I set it up with a couple of guys who are experts in the event industry. Well, we'll help you. We know how to run a big trade show. Paid for the deposit myself, and then they decided to bugger off and leave me with the whole responsibility of running this show after I told everyone that I was going to be putting on this new trade show. It had been in the press. I started telling all my contacts about it. I paid for the venue, so that was a bit of a that was definitely a low. But the high of that is actually we managed to pull it off, and it was amazing. We had a queue around the block of people trying to get in, because you don't know when the first time you run a show, you think, well, how many people might come? 300, 500, 2,000. So we had Mary Portis had contacted us saying, can I speak at your event? So she headlined it, and there was a queue around the block of people to get in. So at that point I thought, I'm onto something now. People do want to find UK manufacturers.
Yeah.
But then another low was, of course, we had to pull the show last year. It was supposed to happen in March, just as we went into lockdown. That was possibly the worst week of my life, and we've had to cancel it again for this year. So yeah, that anything to do with the show. We're doing virtual shows now. We did a virtual show last year, and actually that was really well attended, and by people that said, I'm really glad you're doing this virtually because I can meet manufacturers without having to come all the way to London. So we will be doing a lot more virtual shows this year and going forward as well.
It's funny you mentioned Mary Portis, because I remember, I love her, I think she's amazing. But I remember she did a thing, oh God, what was it called? It was about knickers, not very long ago.
That's why she wanted to speak at the event, because she was very, all for UK manufacturing. I can't remember what that programme was called either, but I know the manufacturer that she went to, a chap in Manchester who a chap called David Moore, who's still going with his knicker factory. He's doing more of his own brand now, and that is actually why what I'm seeing a lot of is manufacturers setting up their own brands. So brands setting up their own factories, but also he's now doing his own brand of knickers as well. So it's quite interesting the way things have flipped. Now we have the internet and social media, Ria.
Yes.
Everyone can get out there and reach their audience, can't they?
And I think that's such a really good thing as well when we're talking about the sort of the Make It British. There's lots of really good selling points about making in the UK, but also being able to take customers along with you on the journey. And I know quite a few of the members in my group, they work together, so one person designs it and another person makes it, and it's lovely to see those bits of sort of stories being shared on Instagram and shared on Facebook about the kind of journey of the product and how it's being developed and how it's the fabric choices and just the little bits of the journey that allow people to feel a lot more involved and really feel like part of something when they buy the end product, that they know about it.
Yeah, definitely. And we say that to our members all the time. Like you say, take people on that journey, show the provenance of your product. If you're making it, get in front of the camera and start showing people that you're doing that. And we've got a lot of members that are now gone from saying I could never do a live video, oh my god, to actually every time you switch on Instagram, they're there doing another little demo, sewing something or finishing off some beautiful leather goods. And it's just really, really good to see. And it does mean that they start building a community with their audience and speaking to their audience. And that's where I think small companies are really winning over big companies. And having come from that big corporate background, it's just so lovely to see all these smaller businesses now who are the ones that had a great year last year. So they say it quite quietly, a lot of them, because it's like 2020 was actually my best year yet. And you probably found that with the businesses that you work with, is that they had a great year because they were already online because they didn't have physical retail stores, a lot of them, and they were able to reach their customers and pivot their businesses very quickly and deliver a product that people wanted at a time when people were feeling a bit crap, really, and deliver something special. And people weren't able to get into the high street stores, and people were searching out something a little bit more unique. And so a lot of the small businesses have had a great year, and I think that will continue. Now they've found their voice and found an audience. It's sad to think what's going to happen to our high street because of that, all the stores closing. I'd love to see more of the stores on the high street being filled as pop-up shops or units where lots of businesses can come together. I mean, you just mentioned about businesses working together, and we're seeing so much of that collaboration. And wouldn't it be good to see that happening in a physical retail space more?
There are some places, aren't there? Again, I'm sure I've seen some
a few,
like big kind of mills and big barns where you have like concessions of different businesses, so people can go around and shop different businesses in that one place.
Yeah, I hope we'll see that. I mean, that's what I had as a shop when I had my business back in the early 90s, I had a shop as part of an arcade in Portobello, where there was like 20 or so creative businesses that all made on site there in their shop.
Another thing you said as well about pivoting and about sort of UK when you're talking then, I think one really great example of last year is the face mask, like the humble face mask.
Yeah.
There have been so many British brands who have popped up with really cool, like Liberty fabrics, tweeds. I'm not quite sure how they wash, but anyway, but really cool designs that they've made because they can see the situation and they've developed them quickly. And I know that's just one example. As you said, small businesses in the UK can pivot and go, well, actually, we can do this and this is needed. So let's crack on with a very short lead time. I mean, I've never made a face mask, but I've seen people like really knock them together very quickly and they look amazing. They do the job. Face coverings, not face masks, sorry. And yeah, I think another thing as well you mentioned, I love people showing their skills on social media. And that doesn't mean it has to be like a blockbuster production. They can set up their iPhone, other phones are available, and just crack on and sew or do what they do.
Yes, definitely. Especially when you see the speeded up clips when people have just set their camera up. I love that. I'm obsessed by those sorts of reels and things like that. Yeah.
I think we are, because you see the craftsmanship and you see the time and energy that goes into it. And I just think it's amazing. And I think that if we can drop the kind of, it doesn't have to be polished, just show up and show us you. It's a really important thing to get across and to do more of.
And you mentioned there that you can see the time and love that goes into it. So that then comes back to what you said about, but isn't it more expensive? Well, when you can see why it takes that long to make something, you're prepared to pay because you think you are paying a fair price. So it's about the value you're getting. And so it's not about that's cheaper than that. It's about what are you actually getting for your money when you buy something that's made locally or made by a small company that's making it themselves.
That's a really good point as well. So the pandemic has obviously caused a whole world of issues, but it has also given people the opportunity to maybe start their own business or do more with their side hustle, for want of a better expression, because of various things have allowed them to have that free time, good or bad. If someone's looking to make in the UK, it can be quite overwhelming to think, well, where do I start? I want to find someone who's reliable, this, and this. What tips have you got for people who are looking to engage a kind of skilled, reliable fab person in the UK? How would they find them?
The first thing I always say to people is before you even start to reach out to a manufacturer, you need to have got certain things in place first. So if you're a new business, for instance, I see a lot of new businesses approaching manufacturers, the manufacturers to turn their ideas into reality when actually they haven't really thought about who they're going to be selling it to, what sort of market they're operating in and how much they want to sell it for. They haven't done the research on things like their raw materials and they expect manufacturers to do all that sourcing for them. And they also just haven't, they'll approach manufacturers and just start asking about price, and they haven't really thought through what they should be charging for something and what their costs should be. So I always say to people, take a step back first and make sure, because what I'm seeing a lot, and I'm sure you see this too, is people that are changing career, which is brilliant. I mean, so many kind of lawyers and doctors and people from these really high flying, corporate careers. Right now, I'm going to now set up my own business making clothing, for instance. I mean, we know Sarah from Posh Muckers, don't we? Who makes those amazing, what do you call the suits? There's
Coveralls,
a technical
overalls.
equestrian term, the coveralls that she does, yeah. And she came to me looking to find a manufacturer, and she's a lawyer, I think, originally, or she's from a corporate career. So she was prepared to make sure she learned what all the terms were to be able to speak to a manufacturer. So you sound kind of knowledgeable, and I think it's important to do that even if you're not from the industry, to at least have done some research before, so that when you approach the manufacturer, because like I've said, they're all really busy at the moment. So you have to be able to sell yourself to them and prove to them that you're the client that's worth taking on out of the 200 people that have emailed them that week.
Yeah.
So do your research, even if you're not in the industry, learn some of the terminology, and then you're ready to approach a manufacturer. And then when it comes to finding manufacturers, I mean, there's lots of ways. Obviously, trade show, We have a directory of manufacturers on the Make It British website, which is our members that are manufacturers. Be wary if you're looking in Google, because if you just put in some quite generic terms in Google, in my experience, a lot of people that turn up on the first page are faking it British and don't actually manufacture in the UK. I've seen lots of designers being caught out going to a manufacturer that says UK clothing manufacturer, for instance. Well, they might have one person based on a telephone in the UK, but their factory's in Bangladesh, and they tell people that until they've actually gotten through the sample stage. So there's lots of things you can be caught out by. If you do find a manufacturer, then try and get some references from other clients that they work with as well, to just to double check. Obviously, if you find someone through Make It British, we've done those sorts of checks, because word travels very fast if a manufacturer is not doing what they're saying they're supposed to be doing and not delivering. So we work with anyone that we have exhibiting at our trade show. We've done all the necessary checks on them to check they are who they say they are.
That's good to know. And how does it work with your member directory? Do people pay to access the directory?
We have two versions. So we have the version which is free for everyone to use, which is on the website, which is the manufacturers that are members of Make It British. But we also have a much more comprehensive list, which we usually sell, which is currently not for sale. It's only going to be in one of our paid programs going forward. But if people contact me, if they are looking for a manufacturer, I can always point them in the direction of how we can help. Usually, it's for people, it's getting their terminology right first. So in the instance with Sarah, with her Posh Muckers, if she'd said, I'm looking for someone to make me women's clothing, it would have been too broad, because there's so many different types of manufacturers for women's clothing, because you might be making knitwear shirts. But if you say, I'm making a coverall which is going to be worn outside, and the sorts of criteria it needs to meet, i.e. it needs to be waterproof and it's quite hard wearing, well, then you know that you can approach a coat manufacturer who specializes in coats, because it's a similar type of product. You wouldn't approach someone that just made t-shirts to make that, for instance. Totally different machinery.
No, I get you. That's a really good point. So getting really specific, really clear. I mean, ideally, even could you make your own sample or something, so you can, if you've got those skills, so you know a bit more about how it all works.
Yeah, I mean, some people use a seamstress to make a sample for them, and that is worth doing, because they can spend the time with you to get the fit right, get the first patterns done. So that is definitely a way to go. You need to bear in mind, if you get a sample maker to make something for you, the factory will most likely, they'll definitely going to want to make a sample in the factory as well. So you will be paying twice, and the factory will probably have a different way of making something, because they're making it in an industrial setting.
Okay, that's good to know. But as you said, the terminology, being specific on what you want, rather than just going to a manufacturer and said, I want a jumper, and them going, okay, we need more than that.
Yeah, exactly. What yarn do you want to use? What gauge is it? Yeah, totally different.
Really good. And they can find out quite a lot of information on your website in terms of, and your social as well, and your podcast. There's a lot of education out there and a lot of knowledge that you share around this kind of thing, isn't there?
Yeah, loads of tips and advice. Yeah, particularly on my podcast, which we've just launched series 3.
Oh, wow. That's cool. So can you tell us all the places where people can find you and find out more about you and Make It British?
Okay, so, it's Make It British, at Make It British on everything, I think. Instagram, don't use Facebook so much these days, but mostly Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn as Kate Hills, and I use LinkedIn quite a bit. And obviously on our website, makeitbritish.co.uk. And we are going to be running a Made in UK Day. So look out for the hashtag Made in UK Day, which is taking place on the 9th of March, 2021, for anyone that's listening to this in the future, where we'll be highlighting all the wonderful UK makers that we have here in the UK. And anyone can use that hashtag to tell us about a product they've bought that is made in the UK.
That's cool. And can we find out more about that on your social? Obviously, it'll roll out. I know when this will come out. So will that be all a buzz everywhere by then?
Yes, madeinukday.com.
Fab. Amazing. Thank you so much for joining us, Kate. Is there anything else you'd like to add before I let you carry on flying the Union Jack for us all?
No, I just want to say thank you very much for having me on your podcast. I'm a big fan, as you know, and it's been a real pleasure to be chatting to you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ria.